Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cipione, we were just turning to paragraph 4.5.30 at the foot of page 37 of your report, where you speak about modes, i.e. the modes in which the counter could operate. Could you describe the various modes that you speak to there, please?
Certainly. So the concept of a mode allows the different functionality of the Horizon system to be accessed by the user. The one that everyone would be most familiar with is serve the customer, conducting the business of selling stamps, performing the transactions of the post office stock and cash.
Just stopping there, if we go back to the screenshot of the user interface at the top of the page, please. Can we just see there that as this user interface is displayed in this screenshot, it is in fact displayed in the mode of serve customer?
That's correct.
We can see that from the tile on the top left-hand side. I keep calling them tiles. Is tiles the right expression or not?
Tile, button. I'm not
Okay.
sure exactly how they referenced it
Okay.
internally.
In any event, this one is displayed in the serve customer mode. Is that right?
Yes.
So you were telling us that that was the mode that people might be most familiar with, SC, serve customer. Can you tell us about the other modes, please?
Yes. So other modes include all of the back office processing that might need to be done, such as adjusting stock, remming in or remming out supplies, and doing various housekeeping. So essentially, there's the main mode, or what I would describe as the main mode, which is a serve customer, and a lot of other supporting modes to make sure that all of the housekeeping items or all of the ancillary work that needs to be done to manage the particular branch is available.
And when one is in a mode, the other tiles that are either displayed or available within that mode may increase or decrease. Is that right?
That is correct.
And so the extent to which you can use the other buttons is affected by the mode that you have selected.
Yes.
You mentioned in your answer there the concept of REM out to supply division, RSOD, and REM in supply division, RISD. Can you explain the concept of remming in and remming out, please?
Yes. So the stock and cash at a particular branch needs to be could be undersupplied or oversupplied depending on the activity that's occurred at that branch. If it's undersupplied, the branch has the availability to reach out to Pinnacle to provide more cash and or stock. As they receive that, that would be considered remming in cash or stock. Alternatively, they might have collected too much as far as cash or stock is concerned, at which point they want to return that to Pinnacle or the post office, and that is remming out.
You describe in your report that there are three types of transactional data in the system: manual entries, transaction corrections, and Fujitsu entries. Can you explain each of them, please?
Certainly. Manual entries would be the transactions that occur as the user is operating the Horizon counter. So as they're conducting the business of stamps and other services available through Horizon, that is in the that's what is considered manual transactions. And that would be most of the activity that that one would expect to understand about the activity at that particular branch. There are instances where some extra transactions need to be entered into the system, either to correct errors or to adjust for different situations. And those two, one is called a transaction correction, or a TC, and that is generated by the post office. And the second one would be when Fujitsu entered transactions to do the same type of corrective error. So one was sourced from the post office and one was sourced from Fujitsu.
You mentioned lastly, in relation to this component A of Horizon, that Horizon, Legacy Horizon, was coded in Visual Basic, C, and C++.
Yes.
It also utilized Oracle development tools and, as you've said already, the Riposte product. And where in your categorization of the types of software do those species of software sit?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the
Yes,
question?
you earlier categorized software into different types.
Oh, okay.
Where in that categorization do those
So,
three sit?
yes, so Visual Basic, C and C++ are all programming languages. So I would include those in the application development category. The Oracle development tools, these development tools would have been related to the relational database management system, the database that Oracle provides, so I would put that in DBMS. And the Riposte product, that is an application, well, that's a little bit of a mixed bag.
It's a hybrid.
Yes, so the Riposte product is an application, but it's an application that was conformed to the Horizon product. So you could see either it was an application or a application development tool.
Thank you. Can we turn to component C of Legacy Horizon, please? The messaging system. And you say in the first line of paragraph 4.5.34 that the counter uses a messaging infrastructure provided by a system called Riposte. Can you explain what you mean, please, by a messaging infrastructure?
Yes, so a messaging infrastructure is a way of encapsulating data in a structured manner so it can be communicated in bits and bytes to other parts of the system. So it's data, essentially it's data with a lot of structure around it so that other components of the system can understand what that data means.
You say that this was called Riposte, developed by Isha. And you say everything that Riposte handles is stored as a message. Messages are constructed using a format known as absolute grammar. And then this sentence, this is a self-defining and nested record format that is technology independent. When I first read that, I started thinking about my next summer holiday. Can you explain what you meant, please?
So this is it's a method. So the attribute grammar is a method of applying a structure to certain data to data. So maybe an example might make it easier. So let's say I wanted to send an email to someone. Okay. Part of the components of that email would be who I wanted to send it to. Part of the component would be the date I'm sending it. Part of it might be the subject line, and part of it might be the body of the email. Using this messaging type structure, as I wrote that email and as it came off of my email system, it would go, as it was being transmitted, there would be a tag that says this next bit of information represents who I'm sending it to, and stop there. and then there would be another tag that says, this is the subject, and there would be another tag that says, this is the date, and there would be another tag that says, this defines the body of my email. And all of that would be wrapped inside perhaps some other tags that would help coalesce all that information, identify it as all being related to each other. And as a package, that could then be sent and then interpreted by another component of the system that would know, that would understand that structure and be able to consume that information.
You say they are a tree-like structure and could be considered a proto-markup language.
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean by that, please?
So the example I just gave was anticipating that question. So a markup language is simply number one, defining that this is the beginning of my message, and then it could have many elements in it. It could have one element in it, and there would be indicators within that markup saying this is. You should expect 5 elements, or you should expect 2 elements, or you should expect elements until you see an end of element marker. But within each one of those markers would be the specific information that you're trying to send, and it's identified very systematically and very structured. It's easy to understand by a program, but not necessarily easy to read by a human being. It's an efficient way of categorizing and organizing information and delivering it for further consumption by other components.
Can we see this in action with the hammer, screwdriver, and pliers?
Yes.
And go on to 4.5.36 over the page. And so, as you remind us, the purchases of 2 hammers, 3 screwdrivers, and 1 pair of pliers. Using attribute grammar, you say the tree-like structure might use the following relationships, yes?
Exactly. So.
And can you talk us through 4.5.36, then, please?
Yes. So you'll see that at the beginning of this structure, I'm indicating that this is a sales transaction. So it's marked there. Everyone that receives this will know that this is a sales transaction.
And again, this is written in pseudocode.
This is a pseudocode.
For humans to read rather
Yes,
than
exactly.
the machine.
Exactly. So underneath, so the first thing that this particular tree-like structure wants to communicate, in addition to that it's a sales transaction, is who is the customer. So that's the second element that you see there. And then you'll see that there is an indicator of how many items were purchased by this customer, just to give an indication so there can be internal integrity checks to be done on what was built into this particular message. Once we get past the count of the items purchased, we get to item 1, and then item 1, and this is more of the tree-like structure, item 1 will have a quantity and a price and a total purchase amount related to item 1. And then we move on to item 2, and it will also have a quantity, a price, and a total purchase amount. And that could go on infinitely, or it could go on once. It really just depends on what the actual transaction is. But the flexibility of this particular type of structure doesn't require you to have just 1 or just 5 or just 10. It allows, it's a flexible way of storing information. And at the end of this all, you see that there's the total basket purchase amount.
And so, looking at subparagraph 37 there, you translate that into our example of 2 hammers, 3 screwdrivers, and 1 pair of pliers.
Yes, exactly.
Can you just talk us through that? I mean, it
Certainly.
may be obvious given what you've just said.
So we see that the sales transaction marks, there's a start and an end marker on the sales transaction. You can see that that is the giant wrapper around this particular message. The first element within that particular wrapper is the customer name, which I chose John Doe as the customer. And past that, you'll see that this message contains 3 items that were purchased. The first purchase item name was a hammer with a quantity of 2 and a price of 5 pounds, which totals to 10 pounds for that particular item purchase. The second item is a screwdriver, quantity of 3 with a price of £7, which results in a total purchase amount of £21. The third item is pliers with the quantity of 1, a purchase price of £6, and a total purchase amount for item 3 of £6. And then it sums up all of the purchase amounts as £37 and ends.
Thank you. And can we go forward to page 166 of your report, please, which is Appendix B, 166. Thank you. Can we see here an example of attribute grammar actually written in code?
Yes.
This isn't, I think, the hammer, pliers, or screwdriver example.
It is not. Like I indicated earlier, this is not human-friendly to read. You would have to understand the definition of the structure, see what elements were available within the structure to properly interpret this. But anyone using this particular attribute, if this attribute grammar was the standard for this particular system, every component of the system should be able to interpret this properly.
And would the coder be able to interpret it?
It depends on what coder we're talking about. Not all coders would need to be able to interpret this because there could be a group of coders that are designated simply to do the translation of this information. So there might be one group of like 4 or 5 coders whose complete responsibility is to make sure that this structure is understandable to all systems and to write the code that can both encode and decode information passed in this format.
Good, lucky them.
Yes.
Can we go back, please, to page 39 of your report and paragraph 5.39 at the foot of the page? You say normal transactions at the counter take place within a customer session. Each physical transaction with the customer results in the creation of one or more messages depending on the complexity of the transaction. And then you say this, for example, a stamp sale has 1 message and a postal order results in 2 messages, one for the postal order and one for the fee. None of these messages is normally written to the message store until the customer settles the session. Can you just explain that, please?
Yes. So what this is indicating is that as the clerk is transacting the business on the counter and adding in different items to the transaction, it's not recorded until there's no need to record this information until the transaction has become official by settling it, by receiving some form of payment. So that's what I'm trying to communicate here.
And so the stamp results in 1 message, but the postal order results in 2 messages. Can you just explain that?
Certainly. So for some transactions, there might just be 1 item that needs to be recorded in a message. And for other, so the stamp, that's a fairly simple, straightforward action. I want to pay £5 for a set of stamps. That in the Horizon system, that's just 1 transaction. It's a simple, I sold this book of stamps for £5. However, for accounting purposes or managerial purposes, other types of transactions might need to segregate. For instance, the postal order. The postal order might have 2 components, where one is the amount of the postal order, and then one is the amount for the fee that is being charged to issue the postal order. So in that instance, the Horizon system is recording 2 messages.
You say that a key feature of each session is that they are zero sum. That's to say that the debits and credits of the transactions must sum to 0. Is that right?
Yes.
Over the page, please, to 4.5.40. On completion of a session by a clerk, then the resulting transactions are saved locally on the counter, you say, in something called the counter message store, also known as the riposte message store. Is that right?
Yes.
After that sentence, you say where there is more than one counter in an outlet, the riposte message store is replicated across all the counters. Where there's only one counter, the counter contains two mirrored disks, one fixed and one exchangeable, so that the message store can be recreated on a replacement counter if necessary. Can you just explain that, please?
Yes, so this harkens back to the issue we were talking about very early in the discussion this morning about the difficulties of systems in the time period we're talking about. One of them is making sure that there's the proper amount of redundancy of data to the extent that there's a hardware failure. The way the Horizon system handled the possibility of hardware failure. And when I say hardware failure, I really mean that maybe a hard drive goes bad because all of this information that's being stored locally is being stored on a hard drive. In a single counter branch, well, let's talk about that. In a multi-counter branch, all of the counters can communicate with each other through their hub or their router. And that allows the redundancy to be across different counters. So as a message store on one counter is created, Horizon creates a redundancy of that message store on the other counters in case of hardware failure on the original counter. For a single counter branch, that multi-counter redundancy is not available to them. So for a single counter branch, the way that they the way they make sure that there is a redundancy availability is to have two hard drives within the counter mirroring each other. So that way, if one hard drive fails, they always can revert to the second hard drive to recover the information.
You explain in subparagraph 41 the data replication facility that Riposte had. Can you explain that to us, please?
So this is more aligned with the fact that the communication system might not be online at the time that the transactions or the messages are being stored. So let's remember that the transactions, you can think of that as a real world term, but the Horizon digital equivalent to that is a message. So to the extent that there is no communication between the counter and the campuses, the Horizon system, at least in the late 90s, allowed for an accumulation of all of these messages. If they knew that they were in an offline position, to continue to accumulate those until the connection was made again, and then the replication facility would work through all of those stored messages and send them back to the campus. Once it got confirmation from the campus that all of those were restored, it finished the process. But that whole check and balance was just to make sure that the campuses received all of the messages that were stored at the counter while it was in an offline position once it came back online.
Thank you. You, in that paragraph, subparagraph 41, you say that the counter's messages would be synchronized with a version of the message store saved on the legacy Horizon campuses in their correspondence servers. Well, can you just explain what the correspondence servers were?
Certainly, the correspondence servers were the communication facility at the campuses that basically allowed for the data traffic to move between the counters and the rest of the operations at the data facility or at the campus.
Okay, we'll come back to those in a bit more detail
Yes.
when we get to component D. And lastly, in some paragraphs 42 and 43, you explain reference data, please. Can you explain to the Chair the three categories of reference data that you mentioned there?
Yes, so the reference data, I broke up the reference data into the three categories. So the reference data could have been derived from Pinnacle or the post office. This might be, like for example, the hammer, screwdriver, plier list, to the extent that the POCL had a list of prices for all of their products, their stamps and whatnot. That would be an example of reference data coming from POCL. There was also similar information coming from POCL's clients, price lists and other information that the client transactions relied on to process correctly.
So that's the DWP or somebody like that?
Exactly. Finally, there's reference data that was more of behind-the-scenes reference data. This is reference data that the Horizon system used internally to make sure that the Horizon system was operating efficiently. So this would be this would be a more complicated example of a data-driven logic. The Horizon design had a lot of data-driven logic for instance, how the menus showed up, what menus were available in the different modes on the user interface on the counter. That would be an example of some information that was actually kept in some reference data and not necessarily coded in the source code.
And all of those three categories of reference data, they were saved locally on the counter in the counter message store, is that right?
Yes.
And that localized copy, is this right, is one of the features that enabled trading to carry on, an operation to carry on, even if connection with the campuses was lost?
Yes.
Can we turn then to category or component D, please, the Horizon campuses? Can we look over the page at page 42 to the table at 4.10, please? And just highlight or blow that up, please. Thank you. Could you talk us through the Legacy Horizon campuses, the layers, from the bottom upwards, please, starting with the counter layer?
Yes.
Which we've already dealt with.
Yes. So we just talked about the counter layer, but essentially all of the information is stored in messages. All the transactions are stored in messages at the counter layer, and that's generally what's being communicated to the campuses, and that's being facilitated by what is labeled here the correspondence layer. That layer is that is the layer responsible for receiving the information into the campuses, as well as pushing the information from the campuses back down to the counters.
So that's essentially the next layer up. The correspondence layer is the communications of the network. Is that right?
It's the piece of the campus that communicates with the counters. Yes.
You say in your report that layer and the counter layer shared the use of the riposte message service, RMS, which was a message storage and replication mechanism running on both the correspondence servers and on the counter. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
You say that supported a shared distributed message store that ensured that information penetrated at the counter is replicated at the campuses and vice versa.
Yes.
And that those riposte mechanisms interact directly with the agent layer, a specialized riposte archiver running on the correspondence servers was used to ensure that all riposte messages are written to tape for audit purposes. Can you just explain that, please?
Yes, so the agent layer, I would say that would be your universal translator for the use of all the information, both operationally and financially, once it got through the correspondence layer. So one of the items, like you said, is, it made the information available to be written to archive or to tape. It also translated it into the multiple different consumers of this information that we'll get to in a second. But it was where the translation from a repost message store format to whatever format was needed by any one of these connected services up here. And it will also be able to reverse that translation if one of these other services needed to push information back down to the counter. The agent layer would be the layer that translation occurred at.
You say that it provides facilities to pass messages directly to third-party clients and to return the client response back to the counter. Is that right?
Yes.
And that this layer, the host layer, applies any business rules to the information being received from or sent to the external client.
Yes.
Can you deal next with, on the table, the RDMS, the Reference Data Management System?
Yes. So we spoke about this a few minutes ago, and often throughout the discussion today, the Horizon system relied on reference data to operate correctly. And if we remember back to my theory section, it's very important that reference, when a system does rely on data-driven logic, it's important that there be a system that ensures the integrity of that data within the data-driven logic. That's the responsibility of the RDMS system, is to do the maintenance, updating, and control the integrity of the information that's being used as reference data within the Horizon system.
And so, as you say, its integrity, the integrity of the RDMS, is important to the proper operation of Legacy Horizon.
Yes.
Can you next deal with the data warehouse, please?
Certainly. The data warehouse is a place where it is a facility where information is collected for further analysis by POCL. There are a number of different analyses or reporting requirements that POCL had. This data warehouse is basically the data management layer that responds to providing information for reporting and analytics.
You tell us in your report about the Transaction Processing System, or TPS, which is the next box to the left at this layer. Can you tell us what function that had, the TPS?
Yes, so all of the transactions that are collected by Horizon ultimately terminate at POCL's in POCL's financial systems. The TPS system is what translates the transactions that are collected from Horizon and delivers them to the POCL's TIP system, which is their transaction information processing system, which is it's POCL's internal system for their accounting processing. So it delivers all of the managerial information, all the managerial accounting information to POCL, so they can use it for their financial reporting as well as their managerial aspects of their business.
You say that system, TIP, the final sort of POCL system, was one used by POCL to collect transaction records about all transactions that occurred at branches.
Yes.
That such transactions were gathered in the first instance by the transaction processing system, once the counter had set the end of day marker. Can you just tell us what the end of day marker is?
That's an indicator that says this is a good set of transactions for this day, and we're ready to deliver them to be processed further by Pinnacle or whatever else needs to process these transactions.
You say in your report that Legacy Horizon was not an end-to-end accounting system, but the data that it passes to Post Office Counters Limited and its clients had to be sufficient to enable them to balance their own books and to settle accounts between them.
Yes.
I think I have not included so far the Management Information Services, MIS. Can you explain what that is, please?
Oh, yes. So this was an adjunct to the data warehouse to continue to further assist POCL in analyzing the data. But this was, I believe, specifically used to detect errors or be an error detection system for the transactions that were received from the Horizon system.
And then lastly, it may be obvious, external interfaces in the top right, Post Office Counters Limited and clients. Just explain what that's meant to be.
Yes, so as you know, there are instances that the Horizon system needed to reach out and speak directly or communicate directly with the external client community. That's what this represents. To the extent that network banking services needed to get a verification of sufficient funds to do a withdrawal, that would be represented here.
Thank you very much. I think that's the end of component D, and therefore the end of the description of Legacy Horizon's three main components. You speak in the next paragraph of your report, 4.5.53, which is over the page, about updates, software updates made to Legacy Horizon between rollout in 1999-2000 to the introduction of Horizon Online in 2010. And you highlight 7 or 8 of the most significant of them. Can you just talk us through those? Firstly, the core systems release that was introduced in August 2000.
Yes, the core system release introduced the automated payment services, which supported payments by customers to utility companies such as British Telecom, electricity, and other utility companies, as well as other clients using barcoded bills, magnetic cards, or smart cards. It also introduced reconciliations between the automated payment service and the data harvested by the APS agents and the data harvested by TPS. So a lot of internal reconciliations functionality appears to be added here. And I also note that it seems that there was also a Core Systems Release Plus release, which I would assume was closely aligned with the Core Systems release.
In February 2000, there was an upgrade called Maintenance Release M1, and you say that the main purpose of that was to enhance the CSR Plus applications.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
In June 2001, there was a release called SO6, Release Day D Rectifications. Is that right?
Yes.
And that included a fix. We're not in this table or this paragraph looking at all of the fixes that were released. Is that right?
That is correct.
In 2002-03, network banking systems, MBS, debit card services, DCS, and data reconciliation services were introduced.
Yes.
And you describe in your report what each of those 3 features are.
Certainly. So the network banking services allowed customers of selected banks and building societies to withdraw money from or deposit money into their bank account. So it allowed a banking option functionality to be accessed through the Horizon system. The debit card service was allowed customers to have the functionality of using their debit cards to pay for goods through the Horizon system. And the data reconciliation services related to all the MBS and DCS transactions and help reconcile them for the different data flows. So it was an internal reconciliation facility.
In subparagraph F, you mentioned a development in 2004 when Post Office Limited finance system was implemented, and you described that as an SAP accounting system. What do you mean by that?
SAP is, in fact, we used this as an example earlier. SAP provides ERP systems, part of which are the accounting. It provides an accounting application, and it looks like the post office bought and installed that, implemented that in 2004.
And what do you understand this release to have done?
This essentially took the TIP communication out of the loop from so TPS used to deliver their transaction information to TIP. Now it delivered that transaction information directly to SAP.
Thank you very much. You say that in paragraph G over the page that at some point in 2004 a program called Impact was delivered, and this included a series of updates. I think there are 6 of them that you mentioned. Can you just talk us through those, please?
Yes. A few of them were changing the processes at the branch. The first one I cite here is they were rollovers, which we'll talk about in a bit. But rollovers used to be every week. Now they were going to be extended to a 4 to 5 week period. Non-value stock declarations weren't required and weren't required by the stock balancing process anymore. A concept of a local suspense account was introduced for the processing of variances. Stock units were no longer allowed to carry discrepancies over and any cash accounting, over trading periods, and they had and any discrepancies that arose out of the stock unit balancing were sent into a local suspense account when the stock unit rolled over. Additional checks were carried out in order for the final stock unit to roll over, which included that the stock unit wasn't allowed to roll over if there were outstanding transaction corrections, and local suspense accounts had to be settled before the final stock unit could be rolled over to the next trading period. And then finally, there were changes to the data server that were made to reduce the number of times that the message store was scanned to pick up transactions during the balancing process. A repost mechanism known as notifications was used to add new transactions to existing totals as further transactions were generated. So this was more of an operational behind-the-scenes update.
Thank you, Mr. Cipione. Can we turn over the page, please, to page 46, and undertake exactly the same exercise, looking at components A, C, and D, missing out component B, but in relation to Horizon Online rather than Legacy Horizon. You say that you understand that the online system, HNGX, as it was then known, was piloted in late 2009 and rolled out in the spring of 2010.
Yes.
And you kindly outline the reasons for the release of Horizon Online as you understand them from the documents. To be first, reducing the cost of running Horizon. Can you explain that in a little more detail, please?
Yes. The amount, I would imagine that the communications cost or the inefficient communications infrastructure and all of the related hardware and redundancy that was required to support that old technology was rather costly. With the online system, there wasn't a need for much of that redundancy, and that was one of the factors that helped reduce cost in the Horizon online system as opposed to the Horizon legacy system or legacy Horizon system.
Secondly, you understand from the documents the second reason to make the change was in order to take advantage of improved communication technology reliability. Is that right?
That is correct.
You say that that change meant it was feasible to have branches that were online for the vast majority of time. That benefit a wider change in the business as an increased proportion of transactions involved MBS and DCS. Can you remind us what they were?
Yes, so the banking system and the debit card system, those were the two bits of functionality that were required legacy Horizon to be in online mode to operate correctly. With Horizon Online, it was assumed that the communication facility would be persistent indefinitely, and it allowed for that facility to be available all the time, or those facilities.
Thank you. The third driver that you understand to have operated from the documents was in order to simplify the design of the user interface. Can you explain what you understand by that?
Yes, so I'm sure as the original Legacy Horizon was rolled out, that there were probably a lot of comments on the usability of the system. Looks like they took the opportunity to simplify the number of screens that were required to maneuver through to do the same functions that the Legacy Horizon system did in many more steps.
And then lastly, in order to simplify business processes, can you explain that, please?
Yes, so in addition to just simplifying the screens, that implies a simplification of the processes behind the screens, but it also includes, items such as reducing the number of reports that were available to the SPMs at the branches.
With that introduction in mind, can we turn to component A, which again is the counter and the peripherals? Was it right that the hardware components for Horizon Online were almost identical to those for Legacy Horizon?
Yes.
However, an important change was that every branch received a new router, a piece of hardware which allowed the branch to connect to the data center.
Yes.
Did that router have a physical line connecting it to the data center?
Yes.
But
it could have been possibly, it was either a fixed or a mobile line, but it was effectively a persistent communication link to the data center.
You describe in your report that the new architecture under Horizon Online had 4 layers: presentation, interaction, business, and services. Could we look at those, please, in 4.6.5 of your report?
Yes.
Can you explain what the presentation layer was?
So the presentation layer is simply the way the user sees the screen and how the user interacts with the system.
And the interaction layer?
That was the underpinnings of the presentation layer. For instance, how the menus were organized, and it was also it also replaced. So now that we're online, and now that and we'll get to this in a second, we don't need we don't need the repost messaging technology and we don't need that exact mechanism to deliver the data now. It also helped replace how the transactions were communicated to the campuses.
Thirdly, you say that the business layer provided the business applications in an object-oriented manner. What do you mean by that, an object-oriented manner?
So object-oriented manner is a programming term, and it has to do with more efficiently organizing your code for repeatability, and it's a style of programming. I think that would be sufficient for explanation right now.
And then lastly, the layer, the services layer, can you explain what that was, please?
Yes. This is, so the service layer is, the set of objects that support all the applications and the processing engine. It basically set the sequence of processing steps for the counter to deliver its services.
Under Horizon Online, is it right that customer transactions were not stored at the counter level?
That's correct.
At the counter level, data including reference data, process definitions, and report definitions were stored at the counter.
Yes.
You say that the service layer is the only layer of communication with the data center. Can you explain that, please?
It's that the service layer that reside, all the functionality for communication resides in the service layer, and that's simply what I'm trying to communicate there.
At the figure at the top of, towards the top of this page, at 4.11, you depict the counter setup in a multi-counter branch under Horizon Online. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
Can you just talk us through that, please?
Certainly. So if you remember from a multi-counter example from the legacy Horizon, the configuration required one of the counters to be the gateway PC, which was responsible for communication directly to the data centers or to the campuses, and all of the other counters basically were connected to that gateway PC. The difference here is that the counter, each one of the counters are connected through the communication hardware, the router hardware, which directs the transmission of the transactions to the campuses. So really, what this is showing is that each one of the counters can operate independent of the other counters. And as we talked about, there is no requirement, or in fact, it's not allowed for the messages, the transactions to be stored in messages on the counters. The messages are communicated directly to the campuses because it's a persistent online connection, and there's no need to worry about having them persist at the counter level.
Thank you. You say that the biggest change for a sub-postmaster would have been to the user interface, which changed significantly, and I think we can see that over the page in figure 412 at the top of the page. If we can just highlight those two diagrams next to each other, or those two screen prints.
Yes.
At the top of the page, please. Thank you.
So you can see the look and feel is quite different. And as I described a few minutes ago, the actual procedure through the screens also was different based off a reduced business, a more efficient set of business processes that were represented by a different set of screens.
Additionally, I think you tell us that there were some changes to the available functionality. For example, the ability to transfer sessions between counters was removed when Horizon Online was introduced. Is that right?
That's correct.
That table can come down, thank you. Horizon Online was coded using Java. That's different, isn't it? Because it replaced the Visual Basic components that had been used under Legacy Horizon.
Yes.
I'm skipping over component B then and going straight to component C. You tell us that because Horizon Online only stored transaction data at the data center and not at the counter, as you've explained already, the riposte message center was no longer required.
Yes.
Reference data is, however, still being stored locally on the counter. Is that right?
Yes.
And there was a change in messaging system using XML instead of attribute grammars.
Yes.
Is that right? And do you know why that was? Can you tell from the documentation?
It would, I'm going to speculate, but I'm going to say that the XML and attribute grammar were different versions of the same concept, and XML was probably more a universally accepted method of markup language as opposed to the attribute grammar, and they just took this opportunity to switch. But I don't know that for sure, but that's what I suspect.
And then lastly, you say a difference is that Horizon Online used the TCP/IP protocol instead of UDP/IP to send data between the counter and the data center. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, it's just more of an updated communication protocol that they used.
And then lastly, in terms of the component parts of Horizon Online, component D, you say that there were various updates made to the data center. You highlight two, the branch access layer and the branch database being new elements introduced in Horizon Online. Can you just explain each of those, please?
Certainly. So since there was a switch in how the transactions were stored and communicated to the data centers, meaning that there's now a direct communication of the transactions to the data center. The branch access layer was responsible for facilitating that communication, and the branch database was essentially the management of that information after the branch access layer received the information at the campus.
Thank you. There are a number of updates to the Horizon Online system. For our purposes, the most significant was in 2017, is this right? As you've mentioned already, the release of HNGA, Horizon Online Anywhere.
Yes.
And you say that you haven't been provided with any substantial documents which detail the changes delivered. However, you understand that one of the major changes was that the operating system was upgraded from Windows NT to Windows 10. That was necessary because of the obsolescence of Windows NT.
Yes.
Thank you. So I wonder whether we could take the afternoon break there and come back at maybe 3:10.
Certainly.
If you're willing to sit a little later than usual today, so we could finish Mr. Cipione's evidence today.
Well, I'm perfectly happy to do whatever's necessary to accommodate Mr. Cipione, and I'm sure he'd much prefer to finish than come back tomorrow.
Thank you very much, sir. Good afternoon again, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Can we turn Mr. Cipione to balancing and rolling over? You tell us in paragraph 4.7.1 of your report about a process on Horizon which was prominent, which you see referenced in the Pinnacle's peaks and kells. And that is the concept of a cash accounting period. Can you just tell us what a cash accounting period is, please?
Yes, the cash accounting period was a weekly cycle. I believe it started Thursday, ended on the subsequent Wednesday evening. That was basically a period of time at which point a reconciliation needed to be done. All the books and records needed to be checked to make sure they were in alignment with the Horizon system to the physical stock and cash that was at the branch.
You say that in 2004 you understand that Post Office Counters Limited moved to a monthly trading period, a TP cycle, with months made up of 4 or 5 weeks. Is that right?
Yes.
The cash accounting periods, the caps, were sequentially numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, mirrored the financial year, starting in March each year and running to 52 or 53 weeks later.
Yes.
You say that the cash accounting period is of particular interest as it acted as you just said, a weekly reconciliation point for a branch.
Yes.
you say that the data stored in Horizon was compared with the cash and stock physically held in the branch at the end of the cash accounting period, and that this weekly reconciliation process was referred to as balancing.
Yes.
And you say that this was undertaken for each stock unit in the branch.
Yes.
Only some sub-postmasters, only once sub-postmasters had balanced all of their stock units were they permitted to roll over the branch until the next cash accounting period.
Yes.
And that process of balancing the stock units and moving to the next cash accounting period were commonly referred to as rolling over or a rollover.
Yes.
You explain that a cash accounting period is further subdivided into balance periods. Can you explain those, please?
Yes, a balance period could be shorter than the cash accounting period. It didn't have to be, but it could have been shorter. It was just a mechanism that allowed the SPM, the sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses, to balance incrementally on an interim basis before the end of the cash accounting period.
You tell us that the cash accounting period and the balancing period were each displayed on the Legacy Horizon screen, and the trading period and the balancing period were displayed on the Horizon Online screen.
Yes.
Can we just look at those, please? Go back to page 48. And look at 48, please. And look at the table at the top of 48. Keep going. That's it. Thank you. The pair side by side. If you can highlight those, thank you. And so you tell us that the cash accounting period and balancing period were displayed on the left-hand screen, which is the Legacy Horizon screen. Could you point out where they are on
Yes, I'm afraid that we must have switched out the graphic on this on the Legacy Horizon system because it doesn't show that particular information, but on the Horizon Online you can see the balance period and the trading period on the bottom, but it was inadvertently removed from this particular graphic.
Do you see on the left-hand screenshot, on the
Oh, I'm sorry.
to the right of the line, 2 lines from the bottom in white, it says TP 07 BP 01, I think.
Yes, that's correct. I apologize. I think my reference in the report was back to a prior graph, in which case it wasn't there, so I apologize.
Exactly. That's why I went to this
Yes.
one rather than the one you referenced in your report, because I think when you were screenshotting, that got cut.
Yes.
In the figure on 4.8 on page 37. But I think it is actually shown on this one.
It is.
And then on the right hand, on Horizon Online, can you point out where the TP and the BP are shown on that, please?
On the bottom bar, you can see right as the white shows up above it, the TP 01 and the BP of 03, if my eyes are working correctly.
Can I ask, is there a facility to use a pointer on this document display system? Can you point, please, Frankie, to the TP and BP on the line at the foot on the right-hand diagram? Perfect. And then the BP, thank you very much. I hope that's visible to you, sir.
Yes, it is. And could we just do it with the Legacy Horizon as well, just to be so that I'm sure I'm looking at the right thing?
Left-hand diagram, thank you.
That's it. I've got it. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much. Okay, they can come down, thank you very much. We can go back to page 50 of the report. We're up to paragraph 4.7.5, where you say that in order to balance and roll over, a sub-postmaster had to undertake various steps, a summary of which you reproduce. This process would be undertaken for each stock unit that the branch operated, and you outlined 5 processes. Can you just walk us through those, please?
Yes. First, check all the stocks held in branch against the system held values and adjust the values in the system where required. So to the extent that there was a difference, enter what was actually physically on hand. Declare stamps held in the branch. Declare the cash held in the branch. Then produce a balance sheet, a balance snapshot report, and complete the mandatory checks, making adjustments to transactions or stock and cash declarations where inconsistencies are identified, or accepting any discrepancies that the Legacy Horizon system identified between its calculated values and those from the declarations. And then confirm in Horizon that they wish to roll over this particular stock unit to the next cab.
Thank you very much. You say in 4.7.6 that any loss or gain that was identified through that process must be posted either to the suspense account or had to be corrected by the sub-postmaster adding funds to the till if it was a loss, or taking money out if it was a gain.
Yes.
You explain that the posting of discrepancies to the suspense account was only made once the stock unit had rolled over to the next cash accounting period. Can you just explain that?
So as it's rolled over, so the discrepancy as it was rolled over to the next accounting unit would then cause the transaction, basically cause an update to the suspense account.
Thank you. You explain that once stock units had been balanced and rolled over, a sub-postmaster would produce the cash account report for the branch, which would summarise the position across all stock units, and then the sub-postmaster would check this report, and if they were happy with this, they would roll over the branch to the next cash accounting period. Is that right?
Yes.
You explain in 4.7.9 that which you have described is intended to provide an overview of what steps were followed as part of the rollover and provides the context for the process of checking that receipts and payments matched.
Yes.
You say that the stock unit balancing process consists of accumulating all of the receipts for the stock unit concerned and all of the payments for that stock unit in the period for which the report is being produced, and ensuring that the total value of receipts matches the total value of any payments. When that state is reached, the stock unit is said to have balanced. Yes?
Yes.
You explain some definitions of payments and receipts, which might be obvious, but can you just talk us through those, please, in the next paragraph?
Certainly. Payment is essentially a transaction that was a payment to the customer, and a receipt is a transaction as a payment from the customer.
Thank you. You explain that it's not intuitive that payments and receipts should match one another. However, it's your understanding that the balancing of payments and receipts factored in the cash and stock balance at the end of a cash accounting period, as well as the cash and stock balance at the end of a cash accounting period. Is that right?
Yes, it takes into account the beginning balances and the ending balances.
You set out, and we needn't go through them, at 4.7.14, the balance equations for a stock unit in 6 examples.
Yes.
You draw these threads together in paragraph 4.7.15 on page 53 in an example table at paragraph table 4.4. Can you talk us through this, please?
Certainly. This is a simple example. We start off with cash and brought forward balance for both cash and stock, which in this case just represents stamps. So the cash was 5,000 pounds and the stock was 500 pounds. And you can see that the different receipt amounts relate to payment for TV license, 100 pounds, payment of road tax for 75 pounds, Alliance and Leicester gyro deposit, 150 pounds, the purchase of first-class stamps for cash of 5 pounds, and additional money that was remmed in from POCL of 100 pounds. On the other side of the ledger, you see A&L gyro withdrawals of 50 pounds, a pension payment of 25 pounds, national savings withdrawals of 100 pounds, and the issuance of the stamp of 5 pounds to a customer, which results in the carried forward balance of cash of 5,255 pounds and stock, which is 495 pounds. What this report shows, or the way this report should be read, is you can see that everything on the left side, which is the total receipts, adds up to 5,930 pounds. And everything on the right for the payments also adds up to 5,930 pounds. And you'll notice that the only stock transaction was the 5 pounds of stamps for cash. And you'll notice that that is the stock is being reduced by 5 pounds and the cash is being increased by 5 pounds for that particular transaction. So that's the only one that really goes between the stock and the cash.
So for this cash accounting period, from 14 through 15 and then into 16, the total for receipts, 5,930, matches that for payments, 5,930. So the stock unit is balanced and therefore could be rolled over without the need for adjustment or any further action.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that this side-by-side analysis here is not something that you were able to see when you looked at the data that you were provided by the inquiry.
That is correct.
And is that because the format of a stock unit balance report that was produced by Horizon Online, the manner in which it produced its stock reports was different, because the way it came out of the tally printer was a sequential list rather than a more useful table like this?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Can we turn to our penultimate topic, please? Error logging and remediation on Horizon. This starts at page 55 of your report. Thank you. You say that as part of the incident management process for Legacy Horizon, ICL utilized a Fujitsu proprietary call management system for logging errors and defects. What do you mean by a proprietary call management system?
It was built by and for Fujitsu.
This was known as Pinnacle.
Yes.
You say it was created from another ICL program with changes made at the request of ICL Pathway. Is that right?
Yes.
It was used between 96 and 2003 prior to the peak system, about which we're going to hear in a moment, being introduced. Is that right?
Yes.
You explain at 5.1.2 the various ways in which a Pinnacle can be raised. Can you just explain those to us, please?
Certainly. Pinnacle could have been raised through internal testing or monitoring. So, let's go back to our testing process. The quality assurance could have raised a Pinnacle, or, the development team could have raised a Pinnacle. It also could have been raised from feedback from the user community, either through the user acceptance testing phase or from the deployment and maintenance phase of the work of the Horizon cycle.
Post office counters could raise incidents themselves?
Yes, that is correct.
I.e., if a sub-postmaster fed incidents back to them, they could raise a Pinnacle with Fujitsu?
Yes.
And you say, I think lastly, that through the Horizon Systems Help Desk.
Yes, so users of the system would not have direct access to the Pinnacle system. Rather, they would have access to the help desk facility that was put together by ICL Pathway.
That was called Power Help, yes?
Yes, that is correct. The internal team, so while the end user wouldn't directly raise a Pinnacle, if it was deemed appropriate by the level 1 and level 2 help desk people at ICL Pathway, it could eventually become an item in the Pinnacle system.
You helpfully described for us the lines of support that were available, the first of which was the Horizon Systems Help Desk, HSH, which you describe as the first line of support, being responsible for recording the details of an incident, diagnosing the problem, and attempting to resolve an issue. If it was unable to do so, it would be routed to a second level of support called the System Management Center, or SMC. Is that right?
Yes.
You say that the SMC would determine if the incident was a software code problem. How would it do that?
The SMC would would read the description, make a determination based off of their training, and that it was basically that was their job, was to determine whether it was a software problem or not.
You say that if the problem was a known error, i.e. something described in a KEL, a known error log, is that right?
Yes.
They would see whether there was a workaround that was written into the KEL and presumably suggest that workaround.
Yes, that is correct.
If there wasn't a workaround, the System Management Center would ensure that there was no duplicate calls for the same problem. Just explain that.
Right. So it's very possible that if there were an issue with Horizon, there could be multiple calls coming in about the same issue, and perhaps there was a difference in timing when call 1 to call 10 came in. To the extent that a Pinnacle had already been raised for a particular issue, there is no reason to raise a second Pinnacle for that same issue. So they would simply acknowledge that this call was related to a Pinnacle, to an issue that had already been raised, and not raise a second issue.
If there was known error log or known workaround in a KEL, if there was no duplicate call, or if this call was attached to a duplicate call that was being escalated, and if the incident was identified to be a software problem, was the call then routed to the System Support Center, the SSC?
Yes.
The third level of support?
Yes.
Was that third level support, the SSC, responsible for resolving incidents promoted by the System Management Center?
Yes.
And that resolution was recorded, or ought to have been recorded, in the Pinnacle system, is that right?
That is right.
The maintenance of the Pinnacles was the responsibility of the System Support Center through resolution and closure, with communications right back to the beginning to Power Help, is that right?
That is correct.
And if additional evidence was required, that's to resolve the issue, the third level support, System Support Center, would be engaged to gather the evidence. The second level would be engaged.
Yes, the second level, yes.
In the event that the SSC third level needed assistance from third-party vendors, would they escalate calls to the fourth line support, which dealt with technology from outside suppliers?
Yes.
Can we turn then to Pinnacles and Peaks over the page, please? Each incident, you tell us, logged in the Pinnacle system is referred to as a Pinnacle, is that right?
Yes.
The only ostensible difference between a peak and a Pinnacle is what?
The peak system, there was a peak system that replaced the Pinnacle system using updated technology. There was a bit difference in the format of how they recorded and the technology that underpinned them, but essentially they carried out the same function.
You say as new PPs, that's Pinnacles or Peaks, is that
Yes.
right? Are logged by a team member, they're assigned a unique reference number, is that right?
Yes.
Which sets out when it was open, the last update to it, its open or closed status, a summary of the issue, and the product group. We'll see one of these in a moment.
Yes.
If available information is captured relating to work packages, fixes, other Pinnacles or Peaks for reference, is that right?
Yes.
The way that both Pinnacles and Peaks are set out is chronological and begins with the team member describing the issue, assigning a call priority, a call type, an estimated completion date, and routing to a team leader who would or should review the call, providing approval or rejection, and then routing the call back to the relevant team member. Is that right?
Yes.
Can we deal with KELS, please? Separately, ICL Pathway and Fujitsu maintains a knowledge base of information that included known issues in the IT system. Is that right?
Yes.
And that knowledge base was known as the known error log, or KEL.
Yes.
An individual entry is referred to as a KEL. Is that right?
Yes.
And they contain information on how to address or rectify issues that have previously been identified within the system.
Yes.
The responsibility for maintenance of KELs rested with third and fourth line support, is that right?
Yes.
And they are often or sometimes referred to during the resolution of a Pinnacle or a Peak.
Yes.
They contain structured attributes, including the type, summary, the open or close your date, the status of the KEL, and visibility. What does visibility mean?
How broadly it's been seen by the team?
By the team or by anyone other than the team?
Well, everyone had access to the KEL system within ICL Pathway.
They contain, in the body, information covering the symptoms, problems, solutions, and related evidence.
That is correct.
Can we turn lastly then to some of the materials provided to you and look at some examples? By way of primary materials, and these were date limited up until and including the rollout, I think you were provided with extracted IT incident tickets, Pinnacles, yes?
Yes.
From Fujitsu's Pinnacle system,
Yes.
yes? Equivalent extracted tickets from the Peak system, is that right?
Yes.
2 archived Pinnacle databases, yes?
Yes.
And I think we'll hear in a moment that in fact you didn't analyse, in agreement with the inquiry, to any extent the archived databases that you were provided.
Yes.
Extracted records from the KEL system, is that right? So a series of KELs.
Yes.
And a collection of monthly reports, is that right?
That is correct.
Can we start with the Pinnacles and Peaks then? Can we look, please, at page 167 of your report? You explain, this is an appendix to your report, an example Pinnacle, yes?
Yes.
And you explain in the rubric at the top that this is an example Pinnacle with some of the challenges of interpreting this highlighted as callouts. Do you mean callouts, by callouts, the boxes on the side which have an arrow back to the underlying text?
That is what I'm referring to.
Thank you. You say that you've deliberately selected this as an example Pinnacle because it contains more fulsome descriptions, and many Pinnacles are more challenging to interpret.
Yes.
You say, by way of note, that a Pinnacle was written for internal tracking purposes by the team trying to investigate and resolve the issues, not written in a way to give a complete and accurate explanation of all investigatory steps, such that somebody reviewing them 20 years later could fully understand what had occurred.
That is correct.
Can we blow up the Pinnacle in 18.6, please? So it takes up more of the page. Thank you. So Pinnacles recorded in a standard format certain information, is that right?
That is correct.
Oh, it's gone back. Thank you. There's a number at the top, Pinnacle, X-POR, and then PC00 44570. Was that a reference number, unique reference number?
Yes.
There then is a summary. Can you see the word summary? Just underneath the reference number.
Oh, yes, yes.
Was that or meant to be a summary of what the issue was?
Yes.
You can see there's an opened date, this one at 12 minutes to 5 on the 3rd of May 2000, I think that is.
That is correct.
Then the last update and status, you can see that it was last updated at 21 minutes past 5 on the 6th of July, and that its status was closed.
Yes.
The customer, do you know who that referred to? Not who that gentleman was, but who the customer was in that field?
Generally, it was the person generating the call to the help desk that if this got promoted, if it came through the help desk, the customer that reported it.
And then on the right-hand side, the product code group and the products at fault. Was this meant to identify the two things that are set out there? In this case, the product group was the EPOS, the electronic point of sale system, and the desktop, and the product within that as the cash account.
Yes.
And would there be a similar short descriptor on other Pinnacles?
Theoretically, yes. I do not think that everything was filled in all the time, but I don't remember that exactly. But I do not believe that. But generally, it was filled in.
Yes, I mean you say that you've picked a fulsome one, which has got all of the information that we
Yes.
might want to see. In the reference section, what was that for? Can you see that? The box on the left-hand side, a third of the way down the page.
So this had, different extra information to the extent that they were available. So the copy from, you can see that even above in the summary, it's indicating that this Pinnacle was a copy of Pinnacle PC 0044007. That's repeated here with the indicator that it was a copy from. The SSC Kel, that's the Kel, a Kel reference that could be related to this, that's shown here. The other, I'd have to look more closely and remember what
What that code is.
yes.
And then to the right, a products table. What was the purpose of the products table?
So this is actually repeating the information that we went through also. The product group, EPOS and desktop, and the product name, cash account, which was shown in the header.
And then the activities log, which takes up the rest of this page. And in fact, I think if we looked at this one, we'd find it went on for pages and pages and pages. I think we can see this is page 1 of 8 in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yes.
What was the activities log?
This is the running dialogue of the process of analyzing and hopefully remediating this particular issue in the Pinnacle.
And it proceeds, is this right, in chronological order with earliest entry first, latest entry last?
Yes.
In some of the added boxes, the call-outs, you have noted 3 things. Firstly, that on this one there's an example of some typos, shorthand and acronyms that are used that you as a reviewer would have to decipher.
Yes.
Can you just explain the significance or relevance of the second call-out explanation?
So the current release version of the system, this indicates to me that the dialogue here believes that a new release of Horizon, the CSR C13R, should address. To me, this indicates that this problem should be resolved when this release of the software has been implemented.
And then lastly, you note an entry at 11 minutes past 8 in the morning on the 4th of May, call transferred multiple times within a ticket. What was the significance of that?
This is just to highlight the fact that you will see the user name changing throughout the chronology of this particular Pinnacle, and we're just showing you where that change is initiated. So in this case, Richard Coleman is assigning the Pinnacle to Garrett Simpson.
I think you were provided with 56,489 of these.
Yes.
As individual PDFs.
Yes.
In a date range of the 7th of July 1996 and the 31st of December 2000.
Yes.
Thank you. Can we turn to peaks, please, and look at an example peak over the page at page 168. And again, if we can just blow that up so it's a bit clearer. Thank you. So we know that in 2003, ICL replaced Pinnacles with the Peak system. And is it right that the Pinnacle system was archived and any open tickets from the Pinnacle system were transferred, migrated across to the Peak system?
That is correct.
And the purpose of the Peak system served a similar function to the Pinnacle system, and therefore, as you say in your report, the origins of the tickets within it would be much the same as those identified for the Pinnacle system,
Yes.
i.e. the sources by which these things would be raised.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Beer, I'm a little lost. We've gone over the page as I understand it, but unless I'm lost, this is still a peak. A Pinnacle. My example of a peak is on page 172.
172, quite right, sir. 172, please. Have you had a message? 450. Thank you. You were telling us that it performed a similar, if not identical, function, and therefore the origins, the sources of it, would be the same.
Yes.
Can we see similarities in layout between a peak and a pinnacle?
We definitely can see similarities. Much of the tagging information that you saw in the pinnacles exist in the peaks, and importantly, the running dialogue is in the body, in the activity body of the peak, just as it was in the pinnacle.
But set out slightly differently.
I'm sorry.
But set out slightly differently.
Yes, the format is different.
Can you just talk us through the 4 or 5 lines at the head of the peak and what information we're being provided with there?
Certainly. So we see the call reference, a unique identifier for this peak. The release is for resolving this peak appears to be targeted at the CSR C13_2R. The call type that has been assigned to this peak is a live incident. The group that is working that this particular issue is the EDSC with a target date of resolving this of the 19th of May 2000.
You make the point in the box at the top there that when you were interpreting these peaks, as with the pinnacles, there were acronyms that you had to look up to find out what they meant.
Yes.
Yes, and then on the right-hand side?
So on the right-hand side, the first call-out box talks about the ticket. This ticket's referring to another call, which indicates that they've seen this issue before, and the second call-out box is the ticket is advised to close, then gets reassigned, but no detailed explanation. It's a bit of confusion for me as a reader to understand exactly what's going on based on this description.
I think you were provided with 13,442. I'm sorry, 16,530 peaks. Is that right?
Yes.
You found 13,442 duplicated peaks in the Pinnacle population. Is that right?
Yes.
And so what was done as a result of that?
We picked the pinnacles to use for our processing.
You say that another issue concerns you, and that was the ordering of the activities table in the pinnacles. Is that right?
Yes.
And what was the difficulty there?
As the original population of pinnacles were delivered to me and my team, it became apparent that the actual chronology shown within the activities log was not in actual chronological order, and it made it obviously very difficult to read.
If we can go over the page in your report, so that's page 60 we were at, thank you. And at the foot of the page, I mentioned already that you didn't examine the Pinnacle archive databases that were provided to you in agreement with the inquiry. At the foot of the page, you deal with the summary of the Pinnacle and Peak data used to undertake your review, and you say that this data set change over the course of the review as you receive multiple copies of the same or very similar data across different deliveries. You had to make decisions as to what data sets to use. You also had 2 analysis work streams which were at different states of progression when some of the additional data was provided, and you decided that these work streams should in some cases, use different data sets. And you described the two work streams as analytics and document review. Can you explain what you mean by those, please?
Certainly. So the analytics review was using some of the data elements that we've called out when looking at the example peaks and pinnacles. Not the dialogue necessarily, but some items that were captured from within the dialogue or within the header information of those documents. Those were used simply for grouping and summing and creating charts based off of the information in those structured data components. The document review work stream, on the other hand, existed with the intent of identifying different groups of individual peaks or pinnacles to be reviewed manually. So in other words, we wanted to read everything. We wanted human beings to read everything to gain as good an understanding of the documents as possible.
I think you summarised in the table at 6.1 the documents used in your review by reference to a series of the series of documents that you received and the use to which they were put. Is that right?
Yes.
And so if you start in the middle column, the reference and description, the A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, B1, B2 are the series of documents that you received
Yes.
in the course of your review. The total documents provided, the use to which they were put.
Yes.
You say that neither the analytics nor the document review work streams were used in relation to the first data set, A1, because it was agreed with Fujitsu that these data contained errors and were therefore replaced by document set A4. Is that right?
Yes.
And A2, as it was recommended by Fujitsu, that you use the peak versions of these, which were contained in the data set B1. Is that right?
Yes, that is right.
If you turn over the page, please, to paragraph 6.2.25. Can you explain 6.2.25, please? Can you explain the discovery that you refer to there, please?
So this is simply explaining that while the Peak system did replace the Pinnacle system, the archive databases that were received contained all of the information that was in the Peak system. So it was appropriate to use these archive databases for purposes of our analytics workstream.
Thank you. Can we turn to known error logs, please? And can we turn up page 174 of your report, please? Is this an example of a KEL, a known error log?
Yes.
You explain that this was a knowledge management tool used by both ICL Pathway Limited and Fujitsu to explain how to deal with or to work around issues that arose in relation to the Horizon system. And can you talk us through it, please, using this as an example?
Yes, certainly. So to the extent that an issue Pathway was aware of an issue. They had this mechanism to record, some general information which is contained in the header, the type, title, a summary, key release dates, keywords that are associated with it. It also describes the symptoms that describe the particular issue, as well as what they believe the problem is. Importantly, they also provide some text for what the help desk should communicate back to any user reporting a similar problem. So in this case, the solution that the help desk should recommend to the user is to reboot the counter. And if the message reappears, then send to an engineer. So what the purpose of CAL is, to document known errors, but to also provide remedial recommendations to users reporting similar problems.
In terms of the header, Horizon Kill, R. Coleman 3549 N. In your report, you say this contains the metadata for the KEL, and it included the name of the Fujitsu employee who raised it, the identifier for the peak or Pinnacle that originated the KEL, and the version number of the KEL. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that's all in that top line, Horizon KEL.
Yes, you can see that the peak information is, the peak identifier is a bit below.
The symptoms, is this a fairly typical description of symptoms that we see here?
Typical? It's typical in that it...
In terms of length and detail?
Yeah, yes.
And is this a description from the perspective of the reporting person rather than the person to whom it has been reported?
On reading this looks like a horizon-centric description of the problem.
Not something that the sub-postmaster might say?
No.
And so you've explained what the problem and the solution was, or what those parts of the KEL were intended to achieve. In terms of distribution or availability, viewability of the KEL, is it your understanding that the KEL system was available in read-only mode to the first line support, that's the Horizon Help Desk?
Yes.
The second line supports the System Management Center.
Yes.
The third line support, the System Support Center.
Yes.
And that third line support, as well as having read-only access, were permitted to create a new KEL themselves or to make changes to an existing KEL, to update a KEL.
That is correct.
You say in your report that you noted that not all sections of a KEL were completed in all of the KELs, which indicated to you that not all of the sections were mandatory when either creating or updating a KEL. Is that right?
Yes.
Is it right that it's your understanding that the KEL system, the known error log system, was replaced in about July 2009 by Knowledge Base, or KB, a new system?
Yes.
You had, I think, 656 KELs produced to you in HTM format, is that right?
In HTM, yes.
And they were between the dates of the 26th of May 1998 and the 28th of December 2000?
Yes.
And is the last species of principal documentary information that was provided to you a management report.
Yes.
You had 105 of those given to you, and I think they included 19 pathway program monthly reports summarising the business development activities of the pathway program.
Yes.
13 monthly joint implementation reports.
Yes.
They're jointly issued by ICL Pathway and Post Office Counters Limited.
Yes.
4 Pathway customer service reports containing summaries of the performance of the ICL Pathway Customer Service Business Support Unit.
Yes.
And then the largest category, 44 Pathway monthly reports, being a comprehensive management report for ICL Pathway, ranging from October 96 to December 2000.
Yes.
Plainly, you didn't get every report for every month in that time range.
That is correct.
The 2 managing directors were the approval authorities for those reports. J.H. Bennett, Mr. Bennett, was the approval authority up until November 1999, and M. Stairs, Mr. Stairs, was the approval authority beginning in January 2000.
Yes.
And they followed a typical format, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And you set out the 10 parts of them in Roman numerals in paragraph 6.4.1, Roman numeral 1 to 10 of your report.
Yes.
You focused on that largest category, the 44 reports, the pathway monthly reports.
Yes.
4 of them were duplicative, and therefore you had 40 reports to analyse.
That is correct.
Mr. Cipione, they're the only questions that I ask of you. I've had a question fed through to me. If you just give me one moment. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm not going to ask that question now. I think that's for next time.
Okay.
They're the only questions that I ask of you at the moment. You're returning to us, I think, on the 18th and 19th of November. Ordinarily, the chairman would say to you that you're in purdah, that you shouldn't discuss your evidence with anyone or the evidence that you are to give with anyone. Can I ask for permission, sir, to be released from that embargo, and so that counsel to the inquiry can speak with Mr. Cipione in the intervening period, including about his evidence?
I'm very much inclined to accede to that request. I note that there are a number of CPs in the room. If anyone wishes to oppose that suggestion, now's the time. Otherwise, I'm going to allow Mr. Beer to do as he suggests.
Thank you very much. So we said to call participants that now, on this occasion, might not be the opportunity to ask Mr. Cipione questions, that they may wish to hold those over until the November sessions. And I think all core participants have done so, in that we haven't received any questions that other people wish to be asked on this occasion. So, sir, unless you had any questions of Mr. Cipione, that's the end of his evidence for today.
No, I don't have any questions, Mr. Cipione, and I'd just like to thank you for the clarity of your written and oral evidence to date, and look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks' time.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you very much. That means that we're not sitting tomorrow. We won't interfere with the order of witnesses because they've all been warned for specific periods of time over the coming months, and therefore we sit again at 10 a.m. on Thursday.
No, I agree with that. I think we should stick to the timetable unless we're beginning to lose time. When we're gaining time, I think we can use it for other useful purposes, Mr. Beer.
Thank you very much, sir. And can I thank you also for spotting the deliberate error earlier on when I took
I think that was a test to ensure that I wasn't too remote from the proceedings, Mr. Beer.
Very much so. You got me, sir. Thank you. Thank you. So 10 a.m. on Thursday.
Yeah. Well, actually, since it's highly likely that I will appear in person on Thursday, could we just say 10:15 so as to avoid any possibility that people will have to wait for me?
So thank you very much. Yes.